Hey guys, it is time for chapter 5, which it's so interesting that in the book Disciple Maker's Handbook that we kind of went through the first few chapters where it was really foundational and theology and what we believe and why we believe it. And then chapters 3 and 4 were a little bit more practical about relationships and about what this whole thing can really look like just on the day-to-day and how to kind of put some guidelines around it and just good things to know and do. But then we go back to kind of square one with what it talks about in the intro, even in chapter 1, of what is in that box for us, that one thing that is the center of our lives, and of course that's Jesus. And so I love that it goes back, because instead of going forward and trying to figure out, okay, well, how are people doing it now and what are the new ways to do discipleship, it's really all about going back and simplifying things. And so I really love that. And so we really talk about Jesus. I'm going to keep this really short today. There were some really good questions that we talked about to really uncover the way that we were taught about him, about who he was, about what he did, and now our understanding today. And of course, we're continually growing in that always. But I love the quote by the guy from U2 who talks about how Jesus was either the Messiah, which is who he said that he was, or he was some nutter. And I just laugh at that because it's just so, like, I think Jesus would have thought that that was funny. And so loved that. And so just want you to take a minute to really think after you watch this video. I'll go ahead and include the questions below as well as in the email, but want you guys to really take a moment to think about these questions for yourself, which you might have as you were reading the chapter as well. But describing the Jesus that you first understood. We had some people talk in the group about how they grew up Catholic, and that was just there were all these rituals that every week, they came and confessed their sins, and it was just this cycle of continually doing the same thing and nothing really changing, was their personal experience in that. And so there were some others who grew up in churches where they weren't really connected very well and didn't really dive in much to what it really looked like to be a Christian. They were just attending at the time. So I want you to really think about who the Jesus was that you heard preached, whether you did hear about that growing up or what your understanding of him was before you were a believer. And then comparing that to now is so important to make sure that we really have a right understanding of who he is, of who we're worshiping, and who we are introducing somebody that we are discipling to. Because if we're introducing them to somebody who is anything less than the fullness of who he is, then we're really letting that person miss out on a lot. So of course we're not going to do things perfectly. It's not what we're asking you to do, but just to really dive in and let the Lord kind of press on those areas where he really wants to show you his character more. So kind of asking yourself some of the things like, when did you realize that something wasn't really right? Or what did it take for you to really see that? Was it an experience? Was it a long period of time? What was it that really helped you to kind of see the differences between and how you had been understanding him? And thinking about how Jesus being fully God and fully human, how that impacts our day-to-day, because it does. And I think sometimes that we forget that he lived the day-to-day, stuck in time just like we do. So thinking about all of these things and really asking the Lord to search our hearts and to show us those areas that we might not be fully understanding who he is. So also thinking about some things of how conversations have gone for you when you have talked with somebody about Jesus, whether they were a believer and it was a sort of mentoring conversation, whether it was a peer conversation, somebody that you're talking to who believes the same as you. Maybe it was you're talking to somebody who is not really a believer. They're kind of open to hearing what you're saying but not really against it, or conversations with somebody who is really not open to hearing much about it. So just think back a little bit on those conversations of I know sometimes we can really stress on, what in the world do I say? What do I do in these situations? And I really am praying for us for discernment to know when to share, when is not the right time to share, and trusting the Lord to give us those words to share about him. But he's really cultivating that in our hearts as we allow ourselves to be steeped in the word. The Bible is really so huge that a lot of people said was vital for them in really rediscovering who Jesus truly is. And something that I'm personally, this is what I'll end with, of something that I am personally asking myself is, where is Jesus very gracious with me, but I am not really showing grace to others in that area? So that's a really big question that I am digging into now, of how I can be realizing the grace that's been given to me and make sure that I am being gracious with others, and thinking about the situations where I might be tempted to act a certain way, and to really be prepared that in those situations of how I can be reacting differently. I said I was going to end, but here's a few more little thoughts. So, of course, we are trying to be like Christ, but he never sinned. And so how do we wrestle with being like him and constantly bringing ourselves to his feet and just saying, I want to learn from you and to be more like you, but we're still going to sin? And how do we handle those times that we sin? Do we try to hide it? Do we have somebody we can talk to about it who can get us on the right track? Are we open to getting on the right track? Those are the sorts of things that we want to be mindful of for ourselves, of when non-believers see us fail in sin, how do we respond? We had a conversation, somebody had mentioned Ravi Zacharias, and they mentioned a sermon that he preached that was a truth. But then when you hear the story of his life and some things behind the scenes that people didn't really know about, and now the masses know this giant story, and it's not flattering for believers at all. And that causes some questions from non-believers of saying they believed in this God, but yet they were doing this thing. How does that make sense? Why should I worship the God that you worship if people are going to act like that who worship him? So these are big questions. They're really deep why questions, and so that's why I don't really have much to teach on this or to even share from the book. It's really you diving in. So the next quiet time that you have, whether it's tonight, tomorrow morning, whenever you're watching this, really just take some time to ask God to show you, not just to show you where you can grow, but how you've already grown. I definitely want you guys to celebrate the areas of your lives that you have already matured in. That's definitely something not to move past. So celebrate those first before moving on into somewhere to grow in. So getting in the wheelbarrow. I love this story, and I would not be getting in that guy's wheelbarrow. I do not know him, and just because he can go across a few times over that tightrope with a wheelbarrow, I'm still not getting in there. But when we think about, okay, I know that I'm in the wheelbarrow that Jesus is pushing. I've decided to be there, but the question for me was, am I white knuckling it and trying to stay perfectly balanced and control anything that I can possibly control in life, or am I sitting and looking at the beautiful scenery? It was at Niagara Falls, and I've been there before, and it is absolutely breathtaking, and everything is just misty and glowing and wonderful. And so be mindful to check your heart as well, of if you're in the wheelbarrow that Jesus is pushing across that tightrope way up in the air, it's very scary, but when you know that you can trust the person who is in control, then we can relax and enjoy the view. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you guys are really enjoying this book, and please go ahead and comment below or reply to the email to let me know what you guys are thinking about this as well after you have some time to think about it.